Questions on the homework assignments before we get started?
Yes. Okay, I didn't keep I didn't.
Which one do you want to look at? Number 3? So looking at number 3, m squared plus m minus 90, and then we'll look at number 11.
Wait.
M squared plus m minus 90. There is no greatest common factor between these three terms. So we'd have our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Since the third term is negative, our signs are opposite. Factors of m squared are going to be m and m. Now our factors of 90 are 1 and 90, 2 and 45, 3 and 30, 4, I do not believe divides into 90. Nope. But then we have 5 and, there's 1, 18, 6 and 15. 7 is not a factor of 90, and I don't believe 8 is. We can go on and do 7 too. Neither one of those is a factor, but then we do have 9 and 10. Which one do we want to try first? And if we check this here, m times negative 9 would be negative 9n. m, 10 times n would be plus 10m, giving us a positive m. So m plus 10 times m minus 9. Sometimes it's just seeing it. Number 11. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? 5. And if we factor it out, 5 out of 5n squared is just n squared. Plus, if we factor a 5 out of 10, we're left with 2n. And if we factor a 5 out of 20, we're left with 4. And that's actually it. Now this one is technically factorable because we were able to factor out a greatest common factor. We just couldn't factor any further. Okay. Any other questions on the homework? All right. What we're looking at today is more factoring. But this time, the number in front of x squared is not going to always be 1. So when we look at this first one here, 7x squared minus 31x minus 20. Again, first thing we need to look for is a greatest common factor. And if we look between these three terms, there actually is not a greatest common factor. So we can move on to our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now that we have this, we'll look for the signs. So we look at the third term. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, our signs are opposite. Well, here the third term is negative, so the signs are opposite. One's going to be positive and one is going to be negative. Our next step is to find the factors of the first and third terms. Well, our first term, 7x squared, well, the only factors of x squared are x and x. What are our factors of 7? 1 and 7, 7 and 1. Those are the only ones, so we need to pick a spot to put the 7 and the 1. Where do we want to put the 7? First one. And we could fill it in as 1x or just x. Either is fine. What are our factors of 20? 1 and 20, 1 and 5, 2 and 10. So we do have more than one set of factors, so we'll go on and list them out. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 10. So we'll pick a set of factors and then check and see if this works. Our 7x times negative 10 is negative 70x. Our 2 times x is going to be positive 2x, so plus 2x. And negative 70x plus 2x is negative 68x. Is that the middle term we wanted? No. So we could switch to 4 and 5. We could also switch to 10 and 2 and see if that changes anything. Yeah, so 7x times negative 2 would be negative 14x. 10 times x is plus 10x, giving us negative 4x. So if the numbers in front of the x's aren't the exact same, flipping the other numbers will change the value. So that didn't work. So we can indeed try 4 and 5. Next. 7x times negative 5 is negative 35x. 4 times x is positive 4x, so plus 4x. Negative 35x plus 4x is negative 31x. Is that the middle term we wanted? That's it. So 7x plus 4 times x minus 5. Now we could write this in the other order and say that it's x minus 5 times 7x plus 4, but those are the exact same things, just written in a different order. Questions on this one here? Are you ready for the next one? 2b squared plus 17b plus 21. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? No. So we'll move on to our next step, our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. At this point here, we can find the sign. Since the third term is positive, our signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, which is also plus. So we'd have plus and plus. Now we need to find the factors of 2b squared. 1 and 2. And our b squared would be b and b. So we have b and 2b. Since there's only one set of factors for each, we can just put them in. We don't have to list them out. 21, on the other hand. Yes. 1 and 21, 3 and 7. Which one do we want to try first? We can check this here. B times 7 is 7b. 3 times 2b is plus 6b. And 7b plus 6b is 13b. Well, we can switch the 3 and 7. And we can try this again. B times 7 is... No, I didn't actually switch it. I said we were switching the 3 and 7 and actually didn't switch it. B times 3 is 3b. 7 times 2b is plus 14b. And 3b plus 14b is 17. So now we did get the correct one. So b plus 7 times 2b plus 3. Questions on this here? We're ready for the next one.
In this lesson, like in this chapter, is it going to be anything?
One, that'll be in the next part. Because it's not so much we just didn't have time to cover it before.
I remember, what was like we briefly covered
Yes. And it's been a while. So we look at this next one here, 7x squared minus 45x minus 28. Unfortunately, there's not a greatest common factor. It looks like there should be one, because 7 is with 7 and 28. Yeah, because 45 is not divisible by 7. So we move on to our two sets of parentheses. Third term is negative, so our signs are opposite. Yeah. Third term is 28, negative 28. So the signs are opposite. Factors of the first and third term are factors of 7x squared. We're going to have x and x. Factors of 7 are 7 and 1. So we can just plug in the 7 and 1 because there's only one set. Factors of 28, there's more than one set of factors for 28. 1 and 28, 2 and 14. 3 is not a factor, but we do have 4 and 7. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 14. So we'll check this here. So we'll do 7x times negative 14. Seven x times negative 14 is negative 98. Then we'll have our 2 times x is positive 2x, so plus 2x. And negative 98x plus 2x is negative 96x. Is that the middle term we wanted? No. Now we can flip these two here and put the 14 first and the 2 second. This one here will also not work. Because if we look at the first set of parentheses here, is there a greatest common factor between 7x and 14? If there's not a greatest common factor, or we've already removed them from our quadratic, we can't have one show up later. But 7 and 14 have a greatest common factor? Because if there is one here, it means there had to be one here. But if there's not one originally, there can't be one in either set of parentheses. Now, if I went on and checked this, 7 times negative 2 is negative 14x. 14 times x is plus 14x, giving us 0. So even if we didn't see it and went on and checked it, it would tell us that it didn't work either way. Which one do we want to try next? 4 and 7. And we can check this here. 7x times negative 7 is negative 49x. Positive 4 times x is positive 4x, or plus 4x. Negative 49x plus 4x is negative x. Negative 45x, is that what we wanted? So 7x plus 4 times x minus 7 is our final answer. Questions on any of these here?
So the next part that we haven't done, will that be tomorrow's?
Some of it, yes. 5p squared minus p minus 18. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? So we can move on to our two sets of parentheses. Then we can find the signs. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, our signs are opposite. One's going to be positive, one is negative. Since the 18, our third term is negative. Now we find the factors of the first and third terms. So 1 and 5, so 5 and 1, and then we would have p and p. Only factors of p squared are p and p. Only factors of 5 are 5 and 1. 18, on the other hand, has more than one set of factors. 1 and 18, 3 and 6, 2 and 9, And that is it. Which one do we want to try first? 3 and 6. And we can check this here. 5p times negative 6 would be negative 30p. 3 times p would be plus 3p. Negative 30p plus 3p would be negative 27p. Now we can switch it. Switch the 6 and 3 and try this again. 5p times negative 3 is negative 15p. 6 times p would be plus 6p. And negative 15p plus 6p is negative 9p. So we can try 2 and 9. 5p times negative 9 is negative 45p. 2 times p is plus 2p, giving us negative 43. But again, we can switch the 2 and 9 and try this again. And if we try this one here, 5p times negative 2 is negative 10p. 9 times p is plus 9p, giving us negative p, which is the middle term we wanted. So 5p plus 9 times p minus 2 is the final answer. Questions on this here? For the most part, yes. Yes. All right. We're going to skip the next two and look at this one here. Looking at these three terms, is there a greatest common factor between them? Two is a common factor, but I don't think it's the greatest. 4. Because 4 will go into 16 and 80.
It's hard to go 8.
The 28. So 28, 16, and 80, the greatest common factor is indeed 4. Is there another or anything else in common with all three terms? All three do have an n, yes? We can actually remove more than just one n. We can remove n, 2 of them, n squared, because whichever one has the smallest exponent is how many we can remove. Because all of them do have at least 2, so we can remove 2 from all of them. Now, if we factor 4n squared out of each of these here, well, 28 divided by 4 is 7. N to the fourth, if we remove an n squared from it, we're left with n squared plus. We're going to factor 4n squared out of 16n cubed. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And if we remove 2 n's from n to the third, we're left with n minus our 80 divided by 4 is 20, and the n squared factors out completely. So we can have variables also as a greatest common factor. Questions on this here? Now that we've removed all the like terms from both, we can have our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Since the third term is indeed negative for this here, our signs are opposite. One's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. Now we need to find the factors for the first and third terms. So for our 7n squared, we would have 7 and 1, n and n. There's not a real reason I put it in the first one each time. I'm just picking a place to put it and putting it there. What are our factors of 20? 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Since there's more than one set of 20, we're going to go on and list them out and then pick one of these to try first. Which one would we try first? So we can try 2 and 10 first. 7n times negative 10 is negative 70n. 2 times n would be plus 2n. Negative 70n plus 2n is negative 68n. Now before we try a different one, let's go on and switch these here and try it again. 7n times negative 2 is negative 14n. 10 times n is plus 10n. And we can indeed. Negative 14n plus 10 is negative 4n. So we do have the correct number but wrong sign. And again, whenever we have the correct number but wrong sign, we just need to switch the signs. Because if we check this one more time, 7n times 2 is now positive 14n. Negative 10 times n makes it negative 10n, giving us a positive 4n, which is what we wanted.
Any senior who is working on their FFA state creed needs to report to the ag building at this time. That's any senior who is working on their FFA state creed needs to report to the ag building at this time. And also, if anyone has found any money, they need to return it to the office at this time. The person that lost it is looking for it. Thank you.
Not returning that much.
Questions on this here? Greatest common factor? So it's 28, 16, and 80 all have a common factor of 4, and we've pulled it out. They also have a common factor of n squared, because we can have variables too. Let's look at this next one here. 3b cubed minus 5b squared plus 2b. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? 3, 5, and 2 do not have a common factor. But they're, because we have b cubed, b squared, and b. So we can factor out a b from all three terms. Now the smallest exponent with our variable b is 1, so we can only remove 1. And by doing that, it's going to take our 3b to the third down to 3b squared minus 5b, because our b squared becomes b to the first, plus 2, because our last b factors out completely. So by factoring that b out, we're left with 3b squared minus 5b plus 2. So we do our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Here, since the third term is positive, our signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, which would be negative and negative. Factors of the first and third term. Well, factors of 3b squared, we would have b and b, and then 3 and 1, because those are the only factors of 3 and b squared. Our factors of the third term, factors of 2, 1 and 2. are the only factors of 2. And since there's only one set of factors for both of these here, we're just going to go on and plug them in and check. From here, 3b times negative 2 is negative 6b. Negative 1 times b is negative b. And negative 6b minus b is negative 7b. Since that's not the middle term we wanted, we can go on and switch the 1 and 2. And try this again. 3b times negative 1 is negative 3b. Negative 2 times b is negative 2b. And negative 3b minus 2b is negative 5b. And since that's the middle term we wanted, this here is our final answer. Questions on any of this here? We're ready for the next one. All right. Looking at these three terms, is there a greatest common factor? There is a common factor b in all three, because all three of these terms do have the factor b. Is there another greatest common factor? Possibly the one that's going to be, because 30 and 30, we know 3 goes into it. But 87, well,
No, probably doesn't. 3, 6, 9. Oh, it does.
8 plus 7 is 15. If the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, then so is the number itself. So the greatest common factor for this here is 3b. And if we factor 3b out of 30 in squared b, well, 30 divided by 3 is 10. We didn't do anything to the n, so it's still n squared. And the b factors out completely, minus. As we did in the calculator, 87 divided by 3 is 29. We didn't do anything to the n, so it's 29n, and the b factored out completely, plus.
Oh, I didn't even see that.
30 divided by 3 is 10, and the b factors out completely. So what that leaves us with is 3b times n squared minus 29n plus 10. The next thing I would do is find the signs. Since the third term is positive, our signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. So we would have negative and negative. Now we're going to find the factors of the first term. Well, n squared is going to be n and n. Now for the first time today, 10, which is part of our first term, does have more than one set of factors. It's either going to be 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. At this point here, we just need to pick one of those two to use first. Which one do we want to? 2 and 5. We'll check 2 and 5 first. Factors of the third term. Well, the third term is also 10. So 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 5. And we could try this way first, but it's not going to work. Because if we look at both sets of those factors, is there a greatest common factor in them? Because we can't have any more common factors here because we removed them all. Now if we check this here, 2n times negative 2 is negative n. Negative 5 times 5n is negative 25n. And negative 4n minus 25n is negative 29n. And that is the middle term we wanted. So that's it with that there. Questions on any of this here? Let me give you all the rest of the time to work on the assignment.